CAD is a lot easier when you use an external mouse. So this can be a 2-button mouse with a scroll wheel or a 3-button mouse, but they are usually hardwired in using a USB cable, or they can be wireless. There are a lot of different options. We do not recommend using a trackpad on a laptop. It's a lot more difficult to maneuver and make different CAD drawings using the trackpad. The first thing you'll do is go to onshape.com and log into your account, and you're going to create a new document. So go to Create and Document and give it a name. One difference between Onshape and some other CAD files is that Onshape uses a document that contains both part studios and assemblies, unlike some other CAD packages which has separate files for different parts, and then you assemble the parts into assemblies. So that's one difference to note. This is a default view inside a single part studio, and you'll see there are 3 planes. There's a front, there's a right, and there's a top plane. And you can see them listed over here, and you can hide them or show them by clicking on the eye. And at the very middle there is the origin. And you can click the right button to kind of rotate things around. I'm holding the right button here. The middle mouse button can be used for panning, and then the left mouse button can be used for clicking. And you can change all those settings. I want to start out by just talking about sketches. So sketches are the most important intro concept for CAD. And so what you do is you create a 2-dimensional sketch on one of the planes shown here. So here there's the right plane, the front plane, and the top plane. And you can orient in different directions by clicking on this little cube over here. And what we're going to do is you're going to put a sketch on one of these planes, and then you what's called extrude or do other operations on them to create a 3-dimensional shape. So let's go ahead and start out and create a sketch. So you can click on the right plane, if this is the plane you want to draw the sketch in, and then you click the sketch button right here. Again, left click. Since it didn't automatically orient me towards the plane, I can click this cube over here, and then if I scroll my middle mouse button, I can zoom in and out, and then I can also hold the middle mouse button and pan around. So it's, again, super useful to have that external mouse and not use a trackpad. Okay, so we want to start out, like I said, creating a 2-dimensional sketch, and then you want to do an extrusion. So I'll show you what I mean by that. You sketch some lines or some rectangles or circles. All the sketching tools are up here. You've got lines, you've got squares and rectangles, you have circles, you have arcs, and other geometry you can add. I'm going to do just something really basic. I'm going to click a circle, and then if I click and hover my mouse over this intersection here, it will automatically lock in. And then if I click the left mouse button, that will start the center of the circle there, and then I can move my mouse. I'm moving my mouse outward or inward, and then it changes the size of the circle. And so then if this is the size I want, let's say 4 inches, I can click the left mouse button, and that will put the circle there. One thing to note is that you don't need to specify the dimensions at this point. The other thing to note is that the lines will be blue as long as the dimensions are not fully specified. So I'll get into that a little bit later on. So you have your basic 2D sketch, and let's say we wanted more of a donut shape, so we can create another circle on the inside here. And then when I'm done, I might add lines, I might add other things. Then I come up here and I click the green checkbox that says I'm done with that sketch. So you can see here now in the tree, it's added this sketch. I can rename the sketch if I'd like. I could name it as donut. I can also come over here and with my left mouse button and rotate around and just see that it is truly a sketch that's drawn on that plane. And then I can reorient it by clicking on this cube over here. And again, zoom in and out, pan around. So as I mentioned before, everything starts with a 2D sketch, or a series of sketches, and then you need to do some type of feature on the sketch. And in this case, I'm going to do an extrusion. So you can see extrude, I have in the upper left-hand corner here. And if you hover over it, it will give you some tips on what to do. It says, select the faces of the sketch edges, and then you'll specify some other things like is it a new part or a surface, add, remove, and so on. And the best thing really with all these is to tinker around and try different things. But I'm gonna go ahead and click the extrude button, and then it's asking me which, right here it says faces and sketch regions to extrude. So I want to extrude that region right there, which is the face of the sketch called donut. And there are all these different options, and you can, like I said, it's best to kind of tinker around with them. I'll rotate it around so you can kind of see what happens. Blind basically means it's going to just, it's going to go a distance in a direction blindly. It just pretty much sets whatever distance you want. So I can click and drag this arrow to go whatever depth I want, but more typically what you do is specify here, let's say 3 inches. There are a lot of options here. Again, you'd probably want to go to the help files and read about all of them, but here's an option for a solid, which is what we want. You could also do a surface, which will be different. We want to do a solid. We want it to be a new solid. You can do add. So if you're doing multiple, you'll see that kind of in the future. If you can add, you can remove. Remove would be more of a Boolean operation to remove that material. And these intersections, there are these other things, but the most basic one right here is what I've done, which is you want to create a solid and it's a new solid. So you say okay, and that's pretty much that. Okay, I'm gonna go and delete these 2 things that I just made. So I can just left click, select both of them, and then right click, and then hit delete. So now I'm back to where I was before. And I'm going to just create a different type of sketch and a different type of extrusion just to show you and introduce some other concepts. So I would create sketch, and then it's asking which plane, and so I can click on the right plane. So you can see now that I'm sketching, see sketch 1, and it's going on the right plane. So the first thing I'm going to do is just create a pretty basic shape. I'm going to create a circle, and then I'm going to create another outer circle, and you'll kind of see where I'm going with it. So it's similar to before, but this time I'm going to actually highlight both of these circles. So left click on the first one, shift, and then click on the second one. And then I'm going to change them to what's called a construction line. So construction line are these dashed lines, and they're really like a reference geometry is what some other people call it. So they don't actually drive a shape, but they can be used as reference as you're creating solid lines. Okay, so I did that first, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just create a rectangle here. So another important thing here is you can see that when I created that rectangle, it actually grabbed on to that intersection, and that's good. That's actually where I wanted it, but it didn't get the second one, this one on the right side. So what I want to do is kind of drag that over, and then it locks into that. Those are called constraints, and so constraints are essentially a way to capture your design intent. So I intended for this line to come and be basically be tangent and then connect right to this intersection here halfway through this circle. So that is correct. I'll show you in a little bit. You can actually add constraints if you'd like to do that. The next thing I'd like to do is create 2 arcs. And so the arcs here, you have a lot of different, you have a lot of options. You can click the center point arc, so that's where you click the center, and then you click one side, and then you go around and click the other side. And you can go through the different options. There are a lot of different ways depending on how you want to create that arc, and so they all kind of do the same thing depending on what your intent is. And then I'm going to come back here and actually, I changed my mind, so I'm going to put that back to a solid line. So it's actually going to drive geometry. So you can see here, one is kind of hidden, and one is solid. And so the next thing I want to do is just add some dimensions to it. And so you can come up here, and there's the dimension tool. And so I can click here, and I can hit dimension. And let's say I want that to be 2.5 inches. So I just type in 2.5. You can see that some of the lines now are black and some are blue. And if they are black, that means they're fully specified. You don't need additional dimensions. If they're blue, that means that you still need to specify the dimensions. Like I can left click and drag this if it's blue, and it will change shape because it hasn't been specified. So I'll go in here and I will click the inner one and make this 1 inch. Here that some of the lines are black and some are blue. This one right here is blue, and that just means that it has not been specified, the length, so it's kind of unconstrained. So you need to come up here and select a dimension, the dimension tool, and click the line, let's say, and then come down here and then specify the height as 2 inches. And then now everything will turn black. So I'll click OK in the sketch, and then now we have, as before, a two-dimensional sketch. And you can see that the dashed lines, again, as I mentioned before, those won't do anything in terms of geometry, and those are, again, are called construction lines. But I can do a feature here. I can select extrude, and then I can either select the face, left click, or I could come over here and left click on the sketch, and then I specify the depth as, let's say, 0.5 inches, and then say OK. So that's the solid. Now we're going to go ahead and go back into the sketch, and I'm going to mirror all of this geometry to essentially mirror it across this line, and I'll show you what I mean. So I'm in the sketch, I'm editing, I'm going to change this to a construction line, so it's dashed, and now I am going to click the mirror feature, which is right there. And it says select a mirror line. So I select that line, and then it says here select entities to be mirrored. So I select all of these, but it's having a hard time finding this outer arc. So I can right click on this arc and say select other, and then you can see that it's finding the different entities next to it, next to my cursor. So I actually want it to pick this one, and then that, and then that, and that should be good. So then I can hit OK and see how it's mirrored it across that center part there. You can do inside sketches. So I can go back inside the sketch. I'll show you how to make, for example, a circular pattern. You can do linear patterns, you can do all kinds of things. So I'll just show you what I mean. Let's say you want a circle here, and you want to create some type of pattern of circles all around this center point. So I can specify that first circle, and again it's blue until I add a dimension. I'm going to add 0.25, and then I need to specify its location. So I'll say 0.5 inches. And the next thing I would do is then go up here to the linear pattern and say circular pattern. And I want to do a circular pattern, so I click on that circle. And then I have to left click, and I need to drag this center point to where I actually want the center point to be. And so then you can change all the different aspects of this feature. Like you can say, I want 4 circles. I want 6 circles, however many you want. Let's say we want 6. You can also drag things around, and you can tinker with these different settings. But then I hit enter, and then I have to click the left mouse button. You see the left mouse button is shown green there, so I have to check that. And so that would create that geometry, and so then when I say OK, then it will have created this pattern in the middle. So just as another example of the many different features and tricks you can use within sketches. Another feature you can do is to create things called fillets, chamfers, and things like that. So I'll show you how you could do that. And that would be if you want to round off these edges. So you can come over here, click fillet, and then there's a lot of different options. It will kind of pick all the parts of the edge there. But that you can kind of click on things and try different options. Like there, it only gets that first line that you click. Here it does this what's called tangent propagation. You can do the same thing on the other side, and it'll do around there. You could say maybe you want that radius to be 0.1 inches. It's a little smaller or bigger. Let's do 0.2. Say OK. And then you could come in here and click the fillet again, and then you could get these inner ones, and maybe it's the same size or smaller. Click there, and you can click multiple entities. You just sit and left click. And this is really easy to do for parts that you're going to 3D print, because it won't be any harder for it to 3D print. To 3D print this part, you would first just come down here, right click and hit export, and then give it a file name that you want. And then you have to select these options. Usually I just use the default, and then say OK. And then you can save it locally to your computer, and you'll then upload it to your 3D printer. Go back, click on the Onshape icon. That will take me back to the main menu here, and I'm going to create a new file. So new, create document, and name it Revolve test, because I'll show you how to use another feature which is called Revolve. So to create a revolve, I first need a sketch. So I will select the sketch button, and then I'm going to put this sketch on the top plane. So I'll orient myself, and essentially I'm going to make another donut. And so I can create the circle, and you can see here that it's already been constrained to be along this line. So that's good, but it hasn't been specified how far it is from the center here. So I need to dimension this. So I go to the dimension, and I dimension how far this is. This will be essentially the radius of my donut, 2 inches. And this will be the thickness of my donut. And then I also need to create a line here, which will make more sense in a little bit. This will be the line at which I'm going to revolve this circle around to create the donut. And because it's not actual geometry, I'm going to make it a construction line. So I highlight that line and then hit construction. And I don't necessarily need to dimension it, because this is just kind of using it as part of the feature. So I can say OK. So there I have my sketch. It has a circle and a line. And I can then go up here and click Revolve. And it says faces and sketch regions to revolve. So I click that, and then it asks for the revolve axis. And so for that, I want to click this line here that I created. It's having a hard time finding it, so I'm going to click back on it, and there. And then that created the donut. So I can say OK. So if I wanted to make it a different shape, I could go back and change the sketch, and I can, let's say if I wanted it to be hollow, I come up in here and then dimension it. Let's say I wanted this thickness to be 0.125 inches, and then I say OK, and then it will create the donut. Reverse engineering is when you want to take a physical object and extract the dimensions and possibly create a CAD file of the object so you can manipulate it in some way, either 3D print it or add a feature to it in the real world. Well, let's say you were to want to come up with a CAD file that's close to this water bottle. Maybe you want to 3D print a duplicate of it, or if you want to add a handle to it or something like that, and you want the basic geometry. So you can do this with Onshape. You could also do a slightly better version of it if you were to use a 3D scanner. But I'm going to show you a way to use Onshape, and it's a very quick and dirty way of coming up with a solid 3D model of shapes by taking images and basically reverse engineering, sketching out around the curves. So here's a picture of the water bottle that I took, and you want to use some photo editing software, and the first thing you want to do is when you take a picture of the object, you'll have to be uh, essentially perpendicular to the object itself. So you want to take a picture that's flat on to the object, and it will make sense in a little bit. The next thing you want to do is just make sure that you have uh, straightened out the object in the image, and again, it will make more sense later on. So you can see it's kind of crooked, so I'm going to go ahead and straighten it out, and there's a lot of different photo editing software you could use. This is just built into my computer, like Mac operating system. So that's the first thing you do, straighten it out. Then the next thing you're going to want to do is then crop the photo, so then you capture just the very outer edges of the object. And again, this will make more sense later on. So you crop the outer edges. And then you're going to want to save this as a JPEG. And now you're going to go to Onshape, create a new document, give it a name. I'll call it water bottle. And you'll want to create a sketch. So click sketch, select the plane, and then you're going to want to come up here and insert an image. And then you'll click import, and then you'll select that image. And then it says select the image, and then it says draw a rectangle. So you'll just basically put it in there for now. We'll set the size in a little bit. So now you need to position the water bottle in the CAD file, in the sketch. So you can do it a couple different ways. Like I'll draw a center line here. And so this is a construction line. And then I will put a point halfway down. And then I'll hold and secure that into the center there. So that just holds it into the position. But we still haven't set the scale. So it's still floating in terms of size. To get the size, you'll need to take calipers, or you can estimate it with a ruler or a piece of string, some dimension on the water bottle. So in this case, I measured the widest width of the water bottle, and it was about 92 millimeters. I dimensioned the width, which is that dimension that I measured, and I put it as 92 millimeters. And that will set it to scale. So you can see all the lines have converted to be black because everything is fully specified. I'm going to go in here and use the sketching tools, so the lines and the arcs, to basically trace over the image. So I'll show you as an example here. You could take a 3-point arc. You could actually do a spline too. If you want to do the arc, you could click there, and then you could click over here, and then kind of bring it up to where it forms. You could also try, like I said, the spline, which is kind of a nice tool for curves. You can just kind of click along here, and then it curves around and tries to do a best fit. Okay, I've created arcs and splines and lines tracing all the way around half of the water bottle. Because it has symmetry, I only have to do half. And one thing you want to make sure to do is close the first and last of your lines there, and it will make sense in a little bit why. And then you want to make sure that that is a construction line. Okay, and then you select OK. And then you want to select Revolve, and you select the sketch as the edges of the sketch for the curves, and then you click on the Revolve axis, and you select that middle axis there, and then you should say OK. And it's created this three-dimensional shape. It revolved the sketch. You can see here, due to the way that I took the photo, it wasn't straight on. And so the bottom is a little odd shaped. So if you were to want to do it even better, you might want to get an image a little bit lower to the ground such that there's less perspective to it, and that you can get a more accurate image. But it just kind of depends on what you're trying to do. And this really conveys the basic idea of what you could do using an image and reverse engineering an object.